The suburbs have a deceptive soundtrack. It's all birdsong, distant lawnmowers, kids' laughter echoing down the street, the kind of melody that makes you think you're safe, like you finally belong somewhere. We bought into that tune the day we closed on our house in Oak Creek. Two-story colonial big white door porch, made for sipping sweet tea and watching the world pretend to mind its own business. For my wife, Elisha, and me, my name's Lemaine Tanner. That house wasn't just wood and paint. It was years of saving, hustling, betting on ourselves to turn some blueprint of a dream into reality. It also made us the only black family on the block, something we never said out loud, but could always feel humming beneath the surface like static on a radio. That static had a name, Eve Carroll. Lived 2 doors down. 60-something face permanently pinched like she'd tasted something sour in 1972 and never quite recovered. She was the self-declared guardian of how things have always been, as if progress was a vandal in the night. If we waved, her smile vanished. If we crossed her path, she'd yank her little poodle so hard the leash would squeak. Every time she watched us, our cars, our guests, the color of our skin, I could feel a paper cut opening. Individually, not enough to scream about. But add them up, you bleed. So picture this Tuesday, middle of a regular week. I'm downtown wrestling with blueprints for a new housing project. Elisha, who's a graphic designer, decided she'd finally change out our sticky old door lock for one of those sleek keyless ones. She texted me a photo of the box. No more digging for keys in the rain, she said, about 12 heart emojis. She was happy busy the way you get when you're fixing up your own place. Then my phone rang. Unknown number, local. I picked up, and Elisha's voice, tight, barely there, lame. They arrested me. I felt the world tilt. My wife. In her own house. She'd been switching out the lock, wearing her red tracksuit, old lock halfway out, new one in her hand. She didn't even hear the door open. Suddenly, Eve Carroll barged in, face purple with rage, barking, "What do you think you're doing?" She didn't wait for an answer, just started accusing Elisha of breaking in, screaming about you people. Like those 2 words explained everything. Elisha tried to reason with her, held up the new lock, said, "Eve, this is my house. We live here. My name is right there on the mailbox." Eve wouldn't have it. She pulled out her phone, threatened to call the cops. Elisha tried to close the door. Eve grabbed her arm nails, digging in, then stumbled back like she'd been shoved whole show, caught by some neighbor kid on TikTok dancing on the lawn across the street. Minutes later, police showed up. Just one officer, Rosso, walks in on this tableau, Eve old and white, sobbing. Elisha Black standing in her own doorway, screwdriver in hand. Officer listens to Eve, barely glances at Elisha. Ignores the deed, the driver's license, the evidence. He sees what he's trained to see. He cuffs my wife, charges breaking and entering, resisting arrest, on our own porch. Yeah, that happened. By the time I hit the police station, I'm shaking with anger. The guy at the desk is bored out of his mind until I mention Elisha's name. Then he gets all official, tells me she's in processing for breaking and entering. I'm waving my wallet, my ID, our mortgage. He doesn't care. Tells me to sit down and wait. Hours drag. I call her folks, my lawyer friend from college. Every call is another slice of disbelief. Finally, a new officer tells me Elisha's at county jail, checked by a nurse for wrist pain. It's almost midnight when she comes out, eyes haunted, tracksuit stained left wrist, swollen with a deep purple bruise. She doesn't speak. We just hold hands on the drive home. That silence in the car. Man, you feel every ounce of trust you ever put in the idea of home draining out. We pull up, door half open, new lock dangling, the last thing she saw before they took her away. And there across the street, Eve Carroll's light flicks off. She was watching us, waiting. If you ever felt pure hatred, you know what I mean. Elisha collapsed on the couch, finally let herself cry. Told me about the arrest, how Officer Rosso barely looked at her ID, how he sneered. Anyone can get a fake. How when she tried to pull her arm away, he yelled, "Stop resisting," and slammed her against the doorframe. The promise of the suburbs, she said, broken by the people who swore to protect it. I just held her and promised no way was I letting this stand. Next morning, her bruises looked worse. I dragged her to the hospital. No more jail nurses, no more shortcuts. Real doctors. X-rays, photos, everything documented. Our lawyer friend put us in touch with Anita Wallace, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for eating cops for breakfast. She told us preserve everything, photos, medical records, the TikTok video. And don't you dare finish that lock. We were building a case now, not just for Elisha, but for the idea that what happened should never happen again. The TikTok video was gold, a perfect unbroken shot of Eve coming onto our porch, grabbing Elisha, putting on a show. Leo, the neighbor kid who filmed it, and his parents turned out to be solid. They handed over the footage, horrified by what they'd seen. With that, Anita had what she needed, moved for immediate dismissal of the criminal charges, filed a lawsuit against Eve for assault and defamation, Officer Rosso for false arrest and excessive force, the city for negligent training and cover-up. The city tried to make us go away, offered to drop charges if we dropped our case. Anita laughed in their faces, told them, "This isn't a negotiation. This is a reckoning." She forced them to hand over Rosso's body cam. It was damning, showed him ignore Elisha's ID, escalate at every turn, slam her for nothing. Internal police emails leaked by someone inside proved they knew he had a history of excessive force and just hoped it wouldn't come back to bite them. But it wasn't just evidence. The pressure worked cracks into the blue wall. Neighbors who had turned away started reaching out. One left a pie. Another wrote, "What happened to your wife is a disgrace to our community." Even Eve's own nephew sent an affidavit, talked about her years of calling the police on anyone who didn't look like her long history of racism. That testimony hit harder than anything we could have said. The story went public thanks to a gutsy reporter named Sarah Jenkins. Suddenly, our little battle was on the news, social media, everywhere. People rallied to us, activists, lawyers, even the NAACP. Donations poured in. Of course, so did the trolls. Eve gave interviews, played the frail victim, whipped up her own side. But for once, the voices of support drowned out the hate. By the time the trial rolled around, we were battle-hardened. The depositions were brutal. Elisha stood strong, calm as a mountain, dismantling every racist narrative they tried to paint. Officer Rosso wilted under Anita's questions, exposed for the bully he was. Eve Carroll's act collapsed. She melted down when confronted with the video and her nephew's affidavit. The jury saw through all of it. The day of the verdict, the air in that courtroom crackled. On the count of assault we find for the plaintiff. On defamation for the plaintiff. On false arrest for the plaintiff. The damages were heavy enough to send a message. Officer Rosa was fired, the police chief retired, and Oak Creek was ordered to overhaul its policies. Eve Carroll had to sell her house, her disgrace public and complete. A new family moved in, a young Latino couple with little kids. Elisha baked them cookies, left them on the porch. We had our sanctuary back, scarred, but stronger. Elisha started working with a civil rights group, using her story to help others. I poured myself into community projects, building spaces where no one would ever wonder if they belonged. That old porch, once the scene of our humiliation, became the backdrop to our recovery. Elisha planting flowers, sunlight on her face, her smile brighter than ever. Sometimes it takes tearing down the whole rotten system just to feel safe in your own home. But that fight, our fight, didn't just make us safer. It made our whole neighborhood, maybe even our whole city, a little more just. The echo of that gavel in court wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Our story, like so many others, forced people to choose sides, to speak up or stay silent. So what do you think? Where's the line between keeping the peace and hiding injustice? When the neighborhood music fades, what kind of community do you want to hear? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about justice, about belonging, about what home really means.